Welcome to Bible study at the Central Church of Christ. We're glad to have you here. We have several visitors, and we're always glad to have them as a part of our gathering here. It's another beautiful spring day. We're kind of on a roll. You might have noticed a slight change in the temperatures, but that's part of springtime. We're in the stretch run of a study on church leadership. And a major part of the first half of that centered around the concepts of things about church leadership in the scriptures that are not pertaining to the passages from Timothy and Titus, where the qualifications for elders and deacons are so well known. At this stage, though, we are into those qualifications now, keeping in mind that there's an awful lot said in the scriptures about leadership and what God's view of leadership is that is outside of Timothy and Titus as well. Last time we were looking at the qualification. These are found, by the way, in 1 Timothy 3 and in Titus 1. And so while we'll be looking at other scriptures along the way to emphasize those points, if you kind of want to bookmark those passages, then that's basically the core, the foundation of what we'll be into for the next week or two. The qualification that we were looking at last time is from 1 Timothy 3 verses 2 and 3 and Titus 1:7. And it was talking about the idea of not being a drunkard. And we've expanded that qualification basically a little further than what it just says specifically there. The idea is not being addicted to wine or not being drunk or not being incapacitated. If you think of it as being incapacitated, that would include even things that are just as damaging to decision making and that sort of thing as drunkenness, and that would be the realm of drugs themselves. We're a very drug-oriented culture. I'm not speaking of the drugs that you have to take for medical conditions. I'm just speaking of drugs that are, I'm not honestly sure what they do. I'm one of those people that likes to be in control, so I have a hard time understanding why you would want to take anything that would take you out of control and out of your senses so that you wouldn't have good judgment. But elders have to have good judgment. Their senses don't need to be impaired by any external stimuli of whatever nature. And that would include drugs of all types. And they always run through one cycle after another, whether it be marijuana or even stronger drugs than that. And I'm old, so I'm old-fashioned. You know, I still remember sitting in a pizza restaurant in an Oregon coastal town and looking over, and there was this pharmacy. You know, they don't call them drug joints. You know, that doesn't really spell it out as well as they would like to. So they just call it a pharmacy. And this line of people coming and going. And then when you look at it a little closer, then you realize, you know, you'll see the marijuana sign up there. And I won't get into the business of whether marijuana is a good drug for certain pains and that sort of stuff. Okay, I can buy that, you know, and I'm okay with that personally, but that's not what these guys were there for. Basically, we need elders with unclouded judgment. And anything that gets in the way of that is going to be something that would eliminate an individual who is constantly going around in a fog. That just won't get it. Also, we don't want anybody whose conduct is an embarrassment. Uh, you may have heard the expressions funny drunk or weepy drunk or something like that. I never understood why it was funny to not be able to be in control again. That's alien to my nature. But okay, whatever would cause a person to be in a situation where they couldn't make decisions not only impacts the church, but it also impacts their personal reputation when they're in the community and they're out doing foolish things and not looking like a person that is responsible. In Timothy 3:3 and Titus 1:7 again, we see another qualification, plectes, not violent, but gentle. Uh, Thayer says, not pugnacious, not contentious, not a quarrelsome person. Uh, Look with me at 1 Peter 2. In every way, Christ is an example. Remember, we talked about the example from John about service, that when the Son of God would get down on his hands and knees and wash the feet of the apostles, he was given an illustration of what leadership was really about. It wasn't about being the boss. Well, Jesus also gives the illustration here, and he's the example in this realm. In fact, if you move on up to verse 21, it says, For to this you have been called, because Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example, so that you might follow in his steps. He committed no sin, neither was deceit found in his mouth. When he was reviled, he did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly. Uh, I've thought many times about how hard it would be for me personally to have had the self-control that Jesus had on the cross. And the part that I think about are all of these guys down here that are religious, maybe some of the Roman troops that are there, but I'll give the Roman guys a pass because they probably didn't know any better. They were basically guys who worshiped all sorts of pagan gods, Mithras and a whole bunch of others, and so they truly didn't have any clue. But these Jewish leaders knew who Jehovah was, and they should have known the Old Testament prophets. And there they are making fun of the Son of God, even while they're inflicting pain on him through the crucifixion. If you're the Son of God, come on down. Just show us one more time a miracle. I am so weak that I think if I'd been in that position, I would have come down. I'd have come down right in their faces probably and said, okay, I'm here. And then hopefully for the rest of humanity, I would have crawled back up on that cross. It's hard to imagine the self-control that Jesus had in that situation. Gentle, not violent. The idea here is to not have any lack of emotional control. It's an idea of spiritual maturity. Leaders in the kingdom need to have this quality of being able to understand that differences are not settled by shouts and coming to blows. You can't really imagine a situation where God's leaders would actually get into shouting matches. but it does happen. It does happen. Just because we don't see things like that here doesn't mean, unfortunately, there's not a big wide world out there with all kinds of critters in it. And so, yes, it does happen sometimes. And yes, on rare occasions, even the blows themselves. So who can shout the loudest and who can shout the longest? Who can bully other people into either shutting up or coming around to my position? That's a common technique in our culture. And here in Old Testament and New Testament times, we're warned that our leaders don't need to have that kind of disposition. But it is a very common disposition in our world. A great example are many college and university campuses where basically they don't tolerate anybody who doesn't think like them. They won't even listen. They don't want any other viewpoint. It's like the childish deal of yeah, 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 yeah. You know. And we think of that as like a preschooler doing that number, not people that are supposed to be serious scholars, that are supposed to be learning how to think and what to think. No, I can't listen. I can't listen to that. But we have a system where basically oftentimes we see illustrations of people that not only will they not listen to others, but they outshout them. They try to bully them. They try to push them into their own viewpoint. The next qualification is somewhat related to it. It's the idea of not being quarrelsome. Not being quarrelsome. Amicos. Amicos. If you look at that word in print, you can see that word macho in it. Amicos. And macho is there. Macho is not really, from the viewpoint of a true leader, that's not really a flattering statement for a male. I'm macho. Well, okay. And so maybe you get a splinter in your finger and you start crying, you know, but I'm macho. I'm tough. There's all kinds of tough, but macho isn't the label here. Elders are macho, and that prefix a means not. So the idea is we don't engage in fighting, quarrels, strifes, disputes. Peaceable, peace-loving, not thin-skinned. So many of you in this room either have or you are working in jobs where you have to deal with people. I'll say as a Southern boy, bless your heart. I see situations where waitresses, cashiers, servers, folks of all kinds that are dealing with people, and I see them abused and mistreated and insulted and dealt with rudely and crudely. And I marvel that we have that sort of thing so blatantly in our world. But we do. But we do not let the world's culture rub off on us. And our leaders have to show the way in this realm as they do in others. The idea of not being thin-skinned is really important when entering Bible discussions. We're trying hard to emphasize evangelism here in this congregation. This is one of our primary realms of emphasis right now. lots of things to avoid and lots of things to embrace in that area. But one thing we have to be careful of is not being so thin-skinned that we can't listen to somebody else. Folks, God is all powerful. His word is all powerful. Believe me, if you have any doubt at all, God can stand to have somebody ask questions about what he teaches. He can stand it. Can you think of a single example in all of the scriptures where Jesus was questioned by someone who really wanted to know an answer? I don't get it. I don't understand. Not people who were playing games with him, but people who wanted an answer. Can you think of a single time where he said, "Why, you dummy, what's the matter with you? That's so obvious. What's the matter with you?" No, that's not the way Jesus did things. If someone wanted an answer, he gave them an answer. God can stand people questioning. We don't need to get thin-skinned about it and say, "Well, the scriptures say this." Bite their head off and cause them to turn away and drive them away from the truth. We don't need to be doing that. Or to think, well, what they're saying is like an attack on me personally. You're just not that important in this situation. This isn't about you. This is about God. This is about someone reaching out to God. And so we don't need to be thin-skinned about it. Being thin-skinned, I know, is another example of our culture. It didn't always used to be this way for so many, but it is right now. It's not any wonder then that again, in many instances, there are people who have to have, and this is their phrase, safe places. I can't listen to anything that's contrary to what I believe. I need a safe place. Not because the people that are going to have different viewpoints are going to beat them up or anything, but I just can't hear anything that might disturb my mindset. We need to have our mindsets disturbed, brothers and sisters. If we didn't have somebody that had disturbed their mindset a little bit, you and I probably would still be wallowing in the backwaters of ignorance. Somebody had the nerve to actually think about what was going on, question it, set it up against what the Bible was teaching, and the truth was restored. Not that the truth wasn't there all along, but you get the message. We need to be thinking always. We don't need to be scared to death that somebody might propose something that's against what we've always believed. Instead, we just need to listen to it, think about it, analyze it, set it parallel to what the scriptures say, and then that makes the call. It's not what I believe. It's not what you believe or we believe. Let's don't talk to people in terms like that. Let's talk to them in terms of what we see here in the scriptures is this. And let's don't be thin-skinned about it. Let's don't have to have our safe places when we talk to other people. Let's don't be, the term snowflake was coined to describe people that have to have their safe places. I can't stand anybody to think differently from me. I don't want to hear it. And on a lot of places, on college campuses in particular, they're notorious for this. Not all, but many. There are riots if someone comes in that doesn't say what they already want to have said. You either tell me what I already know or I don't want to hear you. So what does God say about that? Well, he says, these people over here were more noble than these over here, because these guys over here searched the scriptures daily to see if this stuff was true. You are not more noble simply because you swallow anything somebody like me says, or Adam says, or anybody else. That doesn't make you more noble. It makes you less noble. The standard's surely not some guy like me. I can tell you, and it is the truth, I can tell you that I would never deliberately mislead you in what I try to teach. I've already reminded you that it's scary for me in more ways than one to be up here. This is not my comfort zone at all. And part of that is because I know God is going to hold me accountable for every word that comes out of my mouth. And if I'm teaching you wrong, I'll answer for it. Aside from my innate laziness that makes me want to be back there with Linda, I'm pretty conscious of the fact that I've got to say it straight. But if I were the biggest liar in the world, I wouldn't tell you that, would I? So we need to examine what we're taught. And our leaders need to be skilled in discussing religious matters with outsiders and with members of the kingdom, and be able to do it in a way that is not aggressive and nasty and self-defensive, but with reason and maturity. Another qualification that comes up in Timothy 3:3 and Titus 1:7, it's a compound word, and it talks about the idea of not being greedy for gain, no lover of money. That's a compound word. It starts with that prefix, which says not, and then it's got that word phila in it, as in like Philadelphia, love, not love. And then the third part of this word is the idea of argyros, silver, not a lover of silver. That is, someone who is not basically in it for money. Let's take a look at some scriptures. Look with me at Hebrews 13. Now, we try to emphasize this at least once a class period, that virtually all of the qualifications for church leaders are qualifications for us all. That to one degree or another, we all need to be trying to excel or improve in these areas. This would be one of them. In this instance, it's not speaking directly to church leaders, but to all of us. Keep your life free, verse 5 says, 13:5 of Hebrews. Keep your life free from love of money, and be content with what you have. For he said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. There are folks that really don't like to even bring up the subject of money and religion. It's as if, oh, this is just too crass for us to think about. Money is a big deal, and you can't escape it in any realm of your life. And money is a big deal in religion. We're given specific commands about giving. It goes back to the very beginning of man. You know that already, I know. Here's Cain, and he's giving. Here's Abel, and he's giving. One's giving right, one's not giving right. For God so loved the world that he, you know how it is when you get old and you forget stuff. What's that next word? He gave. Giving is an attribute of God. As we give, we are acting as God would have us to. That's part of our worship now. Money matters. I'm not going to lots of places in the world to spread the gospel for a whole bunch of reasons. But that doesn't keep me from spreading the gospel in other parts of the world. I remember as a teacher oftentimes being told by people that were making 4 and 5 times or more what I made, well, you're a teacher, you know, you're supposed to do it basically as a noble calling. And when I was young, I kind of listened to that. It annoyed me, but I couldn't really come up with a good answer. And then as I got older and plainer, I began to say, you know, noble callings don't pay my groceries. I can't go to the cashier at the grocery store and say, I'm a teacher, this cart is for free. Noble callings, like God's work, are not going to pay for buildings, for Bibles, for missionaries, for all the things that are needed. We're not looking to build big bank accounts. We're looking to do God's work. And in our culture, in our day and time, just like most all times of history, it takes money. And the guys that are in charge of that money are elders. I have heard of very few examples. Some of you probably have heard of some, as diverse as our experiences in here are. But I can't remember right now even a single example personally where an eldership embezzled church funds. Not saying it hasn't happened. I'm just saying that's not it. But they are supposed to manage those funds as well as they possibly can. Shepherds have to have a reputation for honesty in finances. You've heard me use that expression, game playing, a lot. This is not an area for game playing. You don't publish a paper that has the church budget on it and end up saying evangelism, X number of dollars, but that covers everything under the sun except what we know evangelism is about. Well, we're very transparent. We've got it all here on this paper. Well, you can have almost anything on the paper. Yeah. We've seen these TV evangelists all the time embezzle money, fleece people out of their funds. We need to have elders that are of such a character that church finances are transparent. And the world of finance is a very peculiar world. When I think of finance, I think of a line graph, and it goes like that. If you look at a line graph of any stock, that's about the way that thing's going to look. It's going to be a bunch of ups and downs. And if you're an investor, you just hope that it's going kind of like this and not like this. But it's ups and downs. There will be times when things don't work out like church leaders think they were going to. We need to have long-range plans. You know, if we did this the way some of us would like, this auditorium would fill up one of these days. And one of these days, we'd have to figure out what we're going to do about that. So we need long-range plans, as well as who's going to pay the bill for the heat for today. And you can think, well, that stuff doesn't happen. I remember attending a church much larger than this one, and we got so crowded that if the fire marshals had come in, I know they would have shut us down, because we had aisles on both sides at the end of the rows and the end of the rows, and we had ushers. But that usher wasn't just like a little polite title, where, sometimes congregations have ushers and all they are just greeters. No, we had ushers whose job it was to try to figure out where we're going to sit these people. We've got visitors coming in, and I would walk the aisles when that was my assignment, looking for slots just to put somebody. Finances deal with issues like that. They deal with people coming in and saying, we have a good work. There are all kinds of good works. Jesus says the poor you'll have with you always. So if you got nothing else, you're not going to run out of poor. So there's always going to be a good place to spend money. And elders have to allocate those funds. It's a difficult task. They don't need to be lovers of money, but they need to be good managers of money. And like almost all areas of church leadership, they don't have to be experts in everything. If you're fortunate, maybe somebody in the congregation is a financial planner or a banker or an accountant or something who can at least steer you in the right direction where you can get some professional advice. We're going to build this new building out there. We figure, because one of the guys that one of our members knows, that guy's second cousin, twice removed, has an uncle who once built a shed, and so he knows something about building. And what he says is this building is probably going to cost us $5 million. That's not kind of the way we need to be thinking about things. And inflation can come along, and disasters can come along that inflate prices of materials, all kinds of things. The complexities of what church leaders have to deal with in the realm of finance is just almost mind-boggling. And we know that just from our own household expenses. Besides that, it's God's money. Now, God has a few things to say about money, including one in the Old Testament. He said, why are y'all robbing me? Now, that's not Ron paraphrasing that very much, because he uses in English, he uses the word rob. Whew. I would hate for an angel from God to be standing here and looking at me and saying, Ron, how come you're robbing God? He sent me down here to ask you this question. You got any good answer for that, boy? When I came to, I don't think I would have much of a good answer. So it's not only amount, but it's also how are the funds utilized? It's a huge responsibility. And it's one of the qualifications of elders that basically they manage church funds well with transparency. This is not an area where that dictator elder would say, we'll take the church funds and we will do with it what we think is best, and we'll let you know what you need to know, but that's all you need to know. Seen that one happen. Is this not a tough job? Is this not a tough job? I'm not just talking about this one qualification, but look at all the things that we've done, and we're still not through with the list. This is not an easy task. Are you looking around at prospects? Are you, young men, working in your lives to try to acquire these attributes to the degree where perhaps you could be one of our leaders or a leader somewhere else? Are you ladies looking at these attributes and saying, I cannot be qualified to be an elder, but I can help to lead, and these are qualifications that I need to grow in? Are we applying any of this? We need to be. We're shifting gears a little bit now. There are some household qualifications. These others have been more or less like personal attributes, and we'll shift back to some of those in a moment. But there are some household qualifications for elders. In Titus 1:6, we're told that the children of elders should be believers, that elders should have faithful children. That word tekna, which in English we could translate as offspring, is a plural word. I'm telling you stuff that I'm not really strong in at all, but it's a plural word, but it includes the singular. That's something to think about because it raises a question that we'll glance at later that I don't have an answer for. The believers, pistos, the idea of being faithful, faithful offspring, having faithful children. Not profligate or insubordinate, not willful and rebellious, not wild. You know, we use that word wild not about as much to describe people as we do animals anymore. It's sad. We're not always talking about mean here. We're just talking about randomly out of control. And we have seen offspring of all ages like that. From a terrible 2 to a terrible 22 to a terrible 52. It's totally out of control. How can a person lead a congregation if they can't lead their own family? Is a really good question. In 1 Timothy 3:4, children are supposed to obey with proper respect. The idea there, the word starts again, it's a compound word, and it starts with H-U-P-O, hupo, which means under. That is, the family is arranged under the oversight of the head of the house, the father. This man is supposed to be keeping his children submissive and respectful in every way. Not, okay, son, lick my boots, serve me. Not that, we know that. But there is to be no doubt about who the head of the house is. So the reason is given in verse 5 of 1 Timothy 3, so that he can manage his household well, he can care for them, he can see about them, he can give aid to them. And here's some issues to think about, of which I have no answers for you. What about the conduct of children that are not at home? They're grown enough or whatever that they no longer live under the same roof. So what about them? Must all of his children be believers? Must there be a plurality of children? Remember, I mentioned that word, that the word is plural, but it also includes singular. So there's something to think about there. These three realms I don't have good answers for. But if you were going to be an elder, you would have to figure out an answer. That's for sure. And I'm sure that there are people in here that absolutely know which way all of these are. I'm telling you that I'm not one of them. I'm not so sure. And so I'll do my cop out. I don't have to think about that for me because I'm not qualified to be an elder. But they are real and practical human situations that a congregation and that individuals who are under consideration definitely do have to think about. So we do have these household qualifications. We'll start next time with not a novice. We don't need newbies trying to lead God's people. So we'll begin there then. Thank you.